Little Rock Nine was an event that spurred from the Brown versus Board of Education court case in 1954. Brown versus Board of Education overturned the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling of separate but equal and deemed that racial segregation was unconstitutional. Many areas, like Little Rock, refused to put that decision into action. The Little Rock Nine were a group of 9 black students who enrolled at formerly all-white Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas, in September 1957. On the first day of their new school year, angry mobs of segregationists confronted the 9 students on their way to Central. The protesters shouted racial slurs and chanted 2468, we ain't gonna integrate.
What about you, sir? Do you think the colored students will show up?
If I got anything to do with it, they won't show up. Well, I think it's a breaking point of the school integration. I just don't feel that they have a right to go to school.
As the teens approached the school, the Arkansas National Guardsmen, dispatched by Governor Orville Faubus to enforce segregation despite the Supreme Court's ruling, blocked them from entering. President Eisenhower was outraged. Mom rule cannot be allowed to override the decisions of the courts, he said in a televised speech on September 24, 1957. The president sent in 1,200 soldiers from the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Division to protect the teenagers. But though each of the Little Rock Nine was assigned a personal military escort for the duration of the year, the troops were not allowed to enter classrooms, bathrooms, or locker rooms. As a result, the students endured daily indignities, threats, and violence. Students spat on them, yelled insults like baboon at them. They also knocked books out of their hands and kicked the students when they bent down to pick them up.
Such an extreme situation has been created in Little Rock. This challenge must be met, and with such measures as will preserve to the people as a whole their lawfully protected rights in a climate permitting their free and fair exercise. In the present case, the troops are there pursuant to law, solely for the purpose of preventing interference with the orders of the court.
The stark images that emerged from the Little Rock Nine conflict fueled public support for desegregation around the country. When people saw what was going on through TV and pictures, they were genuinely shocked and horrified. The events at Little Rock helped to promote the civil rights movement all throughout the country. This event also showed that even though Eisenhower did not want to rock the boat, he would still enforce Supreme Court regulations made despite protests. Elizabeth Eckford was a very important member of the Little Rock Nine because she arrived at the school alone and really promoted change within the country as people saw that racism was being passed on through generations and the true hatred that was bestowed upon African Americans. On September 4th, 1957, Eckford arrived at Central High School alone. The Little Rock Nine were supposed to go together, but their meeting place was changed the previous night and the Eckford family had no phone. As a result, Elizabeth was alone when she got off the bus a block from the school and tried to enter the campus twice, only to be turned away both times by the Arkansas National Guard. She then was confronted by an angry mob of people, men, women, and teenagers, opposing integration and chanting, screaming, and yelling in her face. Elizabeth made her way through the mob and sat on a bus bench all by herself at the end of the block. She was eventually able to board a city bus and went to her mother's workplace, away from the mob and into safety.
I was supposed to go down to where the main entrance is. So I walked toward the center of the street. And when I got to about the middle, and I approached the car, he directed me across the street into the crowd. It was only then that I realized that they were barring me, that I wouldn't go to school. But as I stepped out into the street, the people who had been across the street started surging forward behind me. And so I headed in the opposite direction to where there was another bus stop. Safety to me meant getting to the bus stop. It seemed like I sat there for a long time before the bus came. In the meantime, people were screaming behind me what I would have described as a crowd before.
In the end, Little Rock Nine was an important event in the history of civil rights. It promoted change within the U.S. because TV and newspapers exposed the atrocities that occurred. This event was also important because it showed that the president would support laws and regulations made by the Supreme Court and that the nation would have to abide by these rulings.